What I'm going to talk a bit about in this video is how do we go from these kind of automatic reactionary trigger events through with your kids, your partner, your work, somebody on the highway, whatever it is. How do we go from that experience to one where I'm responding in a way of my choosing? Now, I also want to point out that I use the term reacting to refer to the sort of immediate response, the one that's not involving thought. It's just like something triggers me, I just respond, I just react. And responding is where there's a kind of a space. The words are very similar. I don't want people to get confused. The idea and the goal is to be able to respond, not react. As it kind of is obvious to everyone, when I react, I'm not thoughtful, I'm not considering what I want to say, I'm just sort of exploding, it's just happening. So the goal then is how do we create a space from the reaction, potential reaction, to the response? In mindfulness, we call that creating space for a mindful response. Now that response could be no response. It could be I choose not to say anything. I choose not to engage in some way. That's also a response. That may be the best option at times. That's what I want to discuss. I'm just kind of going to go over what I've been hearing a lot, and the reason I'm doing this video is so many people have been bringing this to me, and my reach is limited, obviously, seeing people individually. I thought I'd do this video that would sort of appeal to a broader audience, and hopefully you'll find it helpful. Everyone from time to time will have this happen. It may not be a problem. A couple times a year it'll happen to me, and I just know maybe I haven't slept or I need to manage my stress a bit better. But if it's happening frequently with you, then here's some, you'll want to tune into this and try some of the exercises that I'm suggesting, and I'm sure that will be helpful. Let's talk a bit about what's happening. So we all want to conduct ourselves in a way, I like to say, of our choosing. I like to behave a certain way with my partner, behave a certain way with my children, my coworkers, people in the community, etc. I'm a mature man. I have a sense of how I want to behave. My values would dictate that. What happens to us is when, of course, we have that, basically everyone would have that sort of same sense of themselves, like I conduct myself and I function a certain way. The pain comes from the fact that, for me, the main pain comes from that issue there, where I want to respond a certain way to my kids. Maybe my kids are 5 years old, 5 or 6 years old, and I think I should behave a certain way with them. And then I explode and yell at them. And then, of course, I feel ashamed, I feel guilty, I feel remorse, I'm disappointed in myself. And therein lies a lot of the problem that I don't think people are necessarily aware of, is the issue has happened and I have reacted in a certain way, and then now the negative emotions are coming in. And there's thoughts associated with those too. I'm going to feel shame, and then the shame would also include things like thoughts like I'm a bad parent, I'm no good at parenting, I can't do this, etc. And so then you start to see this cycle people get into where the event has happened, and in most cases then they're caught in this negative cycle of emotions and thinking that if they continue that just perpetuates. And unfortunately what that also does is put you at risk of having it happen again. One of the predominant cycles we see with parents is they will discipline their children too harshly, start to feel negative emotion, and then when they'll do something else, and then they'll do it again, even sometimes even worse, respond even more strongly or more irrationally, because they're full of all this negative emotion about I can't do this properly, I'm not functioning well as a parent, etc. We need to get away from this cycle. And then the key is, what do we do? Well, looking to mindfulness for a lot of this, which is a big influence on how I work, is we need to step out of this thinking, this emotional thinking cycle by getting out of our head, basically. When something like this happens, I've reacted, I've yelled at my kids, I've had a sharp, curt response to my partner who didn't deserve it. What do I do then? Well, if I have the awareness, I could say I'm sorry. But ideally what you want to do then is to get out of this cycle is bring yourself into your body. You want to focus on your breathing. Take some deep breaths. I like people to, put your hand on your chest. Try to ground yourself. Bring yourself into your body, out of your head, and you'll have some clarity. What's going on here? Because we got to get out of that thinking, emotional cycle, which is spinning around of like guilt, shame, negative appraisals of self. I'm terrible at this. I can't do this. I'm failing as a parent. Whatever it is. We have to get out of that. You have to ground yourself. And we need to start getting better at this. Now, I suggest people start meditating. That's one option. Now, the other option is just practice, as I just showed you, these kind of grounding, deep breathing techniques each day. If we can start to do that, we can start to then create some space. The other goal that's very important is we have to be able to start, as we say in mindfulness, we have to start observing ourselves. Once you're grounded and you're out of your head, you need to start being able to become aware of what's happening. The more awareness you have, and the more you practice that awareness, the better you'll get at this. I need to start taking a position of an observer of my thoughts and emotions, which will then start to give me that space. I'm observing from a distance. I'm not in them. And that's really key. I'm observing them, and and this is something I need to practice. I need to practice, observing my thoughts, observing my emotions, and gaining more awareness. And as you do that, you'll start to realize they'll start to become a space between input coming in, something happening you don't like, something that's in a sense triggering you, and the time to you respond. Like you'll ideally start to notice there's more of a space, slowly starting to become a space where I can then consider and ponder, how do I want to, or as I said earlier, choose, how do I want to be in this moment? How do I want to respond to my kids, my partner, my coworker, the person down on the highway? How do I want to respond? One of the things I used to do with myself, which was not helpful, is when I would have these situations happen more so years ago, I would then look at it not just as like I'm not behaving the way I should. I'm thinking, well, I'm a psychotherapist. The bar of expectation for me is even higher. So I'm not even allowed to behave this way. And so, of course, that doesn't get you anywhere. It just makes you feel worse about yourself. And the only way you're going to get through this is if you create an ally with yourself. Like you start to befriend yourself. You start to have a bit of compassion with yourself. You start to realize that in some cases you're very stressed. There's a lot going on, and you're not intentionally doing this. And there needs to be some focus on, how do I change this, without beating yourself up or attacking yourself over it, because that's obviously, I know we do that, but it's not helpful. As I said earlier, then as we become more aware of this, then there is the space created, and then we're going through things. And if you start to practice mindfulness, you start to practice becoming more aware. If you start practicing sitting with your thoughts and emotions, there's an exercise I do in a course I teach where it's called Just Be, where people will just sit and observe their thoughts and observe their emotions. We're not judging anything. We're just kind of, what's going on here? Where are my thoughts going? What am I feeling? And those exercises help you to start to become more and more aware of what's going on with me. But the key then is I'm observing, and I'm not in it. I'm observing from a distance, right? So now the other thing, which goes along with the way the negative cycle happens, is these judgments about self. And then also in keeping with mindfulness principles, we're not judging ourselves. We're starting to accept that ideally that I need a bit of help with this, and that's okay. These are the ways that I can improve. If I'm critical of myself and hard on myself and pushing myself. When I look at what people would typically do in these situations, which is important to talk about, they'll actually start to do what I just said. They'll say to themselves, I can't behave this way, or I have to manage things a certain way, people, situations, so that I don't have a situation where I snap or react strongly. And so in other words, they're trying to control things more, which is actually going to work against them because you can't control other people, and situations are going to constantly happen in the world you can't control. So this focus on trying to over control, which is most people's kind of immediate response, I need to lecture the kids on how exactly they have to behave when I take them to school so that there isn't any issues and there isn't any problems and there isn't any meltdowns and there isn't any, and obviously this doesn't work because people are going to be people, kids are going to be kids, and things are going to happen. I need to take the opposite approach, which is that things are going to happen, and I can't control other people, I can't control myself. I can only control myself, sorry. I need to focus on how can I be better managing Jim, or how can I get better at this? How can I become more aware of what triggers Jim? How can I become more aware of what I need to do to create that space so I can become the person, and in a general sense, become the person I want to be. I don't want to be going around and having interactions with people and feeling remorse and shame and regret and disappointment. Obviously, that's not the way I want to live my life. What we're talking about now is a way to achieve that. Now, hopefully, I'm going through this very quickly. Hopefully, what I'm talking about is making sense, and I'm not sort of going through it too quickly. Here's the other part here, and if my clients know very well the way that I approach stress. Now, stress is the number one problem for everyone. I don't know about other countries, but when I look at people functioning in this city and the way that our Western society is structured, we're increasingly more and more stressed. This is a big problem in terms of these reactions, these triggers. The more stress I have, the more that's going to happen. Aside from all the stuff I just mentioned, which is important, I also have to try to approach this from the perspective of how can I reduce stress in my life? How can I improve my sleep? Make sure I'm getting a good amount of sleep. Make sure I'm eating properly. Make sure I'm exercising regularly. It doesn't have to be anything, you don't have to be going to the gym, you can just go for a walk. But these are things that are really important in making sure that your mind and your body are functioning well. And I know you hear this every day from different people, but if you want to manage this yourself better, this is important. The way I often describe stress, and if you think about it, right? You go on a vacation and you come home and things happen and you're relaxed and stuff, and you're like, yeah, stuff happens, whatever. And you're really in a stress state, something very small could happen and you're just like, oh, why is this happening? And so in many cases, the situation is the same. The situation is not changed. It's you that's different. You don't focus on the situation. Well, I have to make sure this situation never happens. You focus on how can I function better. When we're really stressed, I sometimes describe it as like we're like a container. We're full of stress. There's no space for any patience or any sort of, oh yeah, stuff happens. You're just full. There's no room. When something happens, you react. We need to try to reduce that stress level. There's a bit of space, which will also help you, and I hope that explanation makes sense to people. You'll have that space to create the space between reaction and the response, so we can then respond thoughtfully. That's important. Reducing your stress. Things like meditation are really helpful. Deep breathing exercises, making sure you have time for yourself. I work a lot and I struggle sometimes with working too much and have to be very careful. Now, the other thing that goes along with all of this that goes back to what I was mentioning earlier is the awareness piece. You need to become more aware of when you're stressed and when you're not functioning well. Like if I wake up and I haven't slept well and there's a lot going on, I will kind of know that I'm not at my best. And so I'll be more cautious about what I do, and I'll also even tell my family, I'm not my best today, I'm feeling a bit stressed, I'm a bit irritable, just be aware. Now that takes, of course, awareness, but it also takes, and this is not something everybody's always so comfortable with, I'm having some acceptance that there's things that are going to happen. And by admitting to other people I'm not functioning at my best, that's okay to say that. That's okay to admit, hey, I'm having an off day. But what it will do is help people understand, because without that understanding, when you snap or yell or something like that, they think that it's them, instead of, I'm just incredibly stressed this week, I've got a huge presentation due, I've got some things that I don't know how I'm going to figure them out. Have some allowance for me being a bit stressed, which doesn't give you the freedom to just behave any way you like, of course. But this is something that I think is very helpful for everyone. Now, the other thing too is, if you have a partner or somebody and you're letting them know, they can be more empathetic, sensitive, maybe help carry some of the load. When my kids were really little, my partner would tell me to go to the gym some days. When I would come home, she could just tell by the way my voice was that I was very stressed. I would be a bit strained with the kids. They were very little, and she would just say, go to the gym. Now, if she had said, you're really stressed, you have to go to the gym, that's not going to work, because I'm going to react defensively and say, well, leave me alone, or something like that. Instead, if you're able to support people and you're like, why don't you go for a walk, or why don't you go to bed earlier, why don't you let me take care of this? Ideally, if we have partners that are supportive, that would be helpful, but we have to let them know what's going on. And if some of you have been going through this frequently, with this reacting and blowing up, you'll realize that saying sorry is a very limited effect, because if I keep doing something and I'm saying sorry, even though the sorry doesn't take long before it doesn't mean anything, because it keeps happening. And I know how frustrating this can be for people, and this is a big part of why I've done this video. Just to go over things, and I just want to kind of summarize what I've talked about here. So we've got the explosive reactions, or the reactions that are automatic, and then we've got the moving towards responding, creating a space to respond in a way of your choosing, thoughtfully. How do I want to respond to this? We're becoming more aware of our emotional and thought cycles, and we're starting to create some distance from them. We're grounding ourselves through, as I just showed you, the technique, or mindfulness, or maybe spend some time, go for a walk in nature. The key being that we try to stay in the present moment, try to focus on, I was just up north on the weekend, I was spending a lot of time focusing on the trees and the water and the different things, and staying in the moment, not in my head about what's going to happen when I return to work this week, which is what a lot of us do, and in some cases would rob us of the experience. But that's something for a different video. Anyways, we need to get out of this cycle, and especially this cycle that's happening where we're triggering emotions, and then we're triggering thoughts, shame, and then I'm a terrible parent, and I'm a failure, and whatever is coming up for you. I'm disappointed in myself. I don't know what's wrong with me, which is a very common response I get all the time from clients. I don't know what's wrong with me. Well, you're human, and you can figure this out if we start to practice some of the things I'm suggesting. So by creating that space and observing and becoming more aware, the other thing I want you to become aware of that I almost forgot is, typically whether it's anger or the stress, whatever, you're going to feel it in your body. I want you to start to become more aware of how your body feels. People carry tension in their chest and their neck and their head, in different places. I want you to start to notice, because usually that's the cue that you get before something like this happens, is you start to realize that your body's tense and you're carrying a lot of stress. And that can clue you into, I need to go and meditate, I need to go for a walk, I need to calm down before something happens, the kids knock something over and I snap. That's important as well. Now, in terms of the things I just mentioned, I said go over those again. Manage your stress well, do the things that we're sort of told to do every day, try to sleep as well as you can, get to bed, at a good time. Eat your regular meals. Don't go for long periods without eating. Watch your caffeine intake. Start to deal with things as they come up. Don't let things kind of like happen with people, especially your partner, and you don't address them, and then there's this big elephant in the room, we're not speaking to each other. You may need professional help to sort that out. But try to manage your stress as well as you can. Figure out a habit where you walk each day, or you wake up and read some sort of inspirational book, or something that, make a gratitude list where you list 3 things every morning that you're grateful for. All of these things will be very helpful. But the most important thing is you need to start reducing the stress and learn to create some space through observing and through becoming more aware of yourself. And this will give you then the space between the reaction and the response. And I know I've repeated this many, many times, but I just think this is really key. This is how you achieve this. It's not rocket science. There isn't something inherently wrong with you as a person. You're just not aware enough. As I said earlier, 90% of our functioning is automatic. If we don't take this into a conscious place, then we're just doing things automatically. Something's triggering us, and then we're just reacting to it without any sort of thought. And we need to be more conscious, more aware, and it takes time, but you'll get better at this. And as you do it, even if it's not perfect, appreciate yourself. Have some gratitude for yourself. Tell yourself, I'm learning, I'm getting better at this. And whatever you do, whatever happens, if you hurt people's feelings, if you do things to people you love and care for, go and talk to them and listen to them and tell them you're not just sorry, but you're trying to change. And you could have, as my favorite saying was with my kids, if I could take that back, I would have done this differently. If I could do that over, I would do it this way. And I think it's really important. I used to say when my kids were little that they're very fortunate to have a dad who makes tons of mistakes. A lot of the people I work with have parents that have never admitted their mistakes and don't acknowledge that they have any flaws or that they haven't done anything right. They've done things wrong. Sorry. And it's important for children to understand that even though you're an adult, you still make mistakes. And you go and you apologize and do your best to make things right. And you give the person some space to talk about how did that feel for them and what was that like to have you yell at them. And that's really helpful. So as you're learning and as you're changing, make sure you're owning your behavior, as I like to say, owning your side of the street, asking for, if you want to ask for forgiveness, or just letting people know that that was not okay, and I'm going to do better. And I'm trying to do better. And hopefully this video has been helpful for you. Certainly if you have any questions, send them to me. I'll do my best to answer them. And I'm going to do a video in a few more days on something very similar, but it's a different cycle that is also quite common. So take care.